Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cloud Show. Today, we're going to talk about migrating to Azure, what it was like in the past, what it is like today, if you use the proper, correct tools for the job. So we're going to be talking to a good friend of mine. His name is Hannes, and he will be the star on the Cloud Show tonight. Hello, my friend.
Hey, Magnus, how are you doing?
I'm doing lovely. It's good to see you. It was really nice catching up with you last week in Stockholm, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like I saw you last week. Oh, wait, we did.
We did. It was gorgeous. Stockholm was beautiful. The weather was nice. Everything was awesome, really.
Yes, I think what we encountered last week can be described as peak Swedish weather.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like
pretty much.
the best weather you can ever get in Sweden, like 23 degrees centigrade, that is for you US people, and a slight breeze.
That was wonderful.
Fantastic.
So, Hannes, tell the audience, who the heck are you?
I'm Hannes. I work for a company called Access in Belgium. I started with them over 13 years ago now as a senior .NET developer at the time. I made it into coaching developers most of my time right now. I'm still involved in architecture of projects and that sort of stuff. But that's mainly what I do today, is helping other developers succeed. And that way I get my hands into many different projects and I hear about a lot of different projects. So it's a great job to have and it's really fun to do.
Absolutely. And so I also know that, and before I say this, before I prompt you with this, I'm going to say we do not have like 4 hours to talk about this. But I hear that you like building guitars.
Yeah, and I knew that you were going to bring this up, so I had this little baby in the background sitting ready. So this is something I did build myself because we have a band with some other tech conference speakers.
You built this?
Needed something small and light to travel, and I'm going to hold this up right now because, yes, that does have a Visual Studio logo in it.
Ah, that's so geeky.
And this is my travel guitar, which I built myself.
Wow.
And one of the reasons I started building guitars was because I needed a hobby that didn't have anything to do with computer screens. It's also a perfect way to get around one of the two key numbers in the life of a guitar owner. One is the number of guitars that you need, which is always n+1, where n is the number you currently have. But there is an upper bound to that, which is the p-1, where p is if you buy one more guitar, your wife divorces you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're not buying them but building them, that's kind of cheating.
Are
right?
you close to p-1?
I'm at 7, 8 guitars.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, my side thing is gardening, as you can see.
Yeah, you do chilies, right?
I do, and basil and stuff. All right, various things. Anyway, moving on. Brilliant. So now we know who you are. So you wanted to talk today about migration. So migrating applications to Azure, running them in Azure, having them run well in Azure after you migrated them is not easy to do.
Well, if you think in terms of the cloud, I'm old, just like you. Like we're old. We knew a time where writing software didn't involve the cloud. And then when we started new projects, we would think about things like what kind of hardware are we going to run this on? Where are we going to host this? What size server do we probably need to buy to get by the first 2 years with this application? Like that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you come from those times, you had applications that ran on servers that were very well cared after, probably either by your own team or by the team that was sitting next to you that was doing the sysadmin. Which led to a different type of software development than the type of software development we're used to right now. Today, we design everything with small components that we can easily scale. that can easily fail, that can easily recover. Then it was much more of a, let's design for this machine and maybe have a failover machine, but that was pretty much the setup
That
that
was
we
pretty
mostly
much
were
it.
running at.
Yep. So now moving to the cloud, it's like vastly different from that. So you have old applications that never were built to run in the
Mhm.
cloud, and now you have to run them
Exactly.
in the cloud using different technology, basically.
Yeah, and with some of my customers, we try to move some of those old applications into the cloud, and
Yep.
the end goal was always like, eventually we want to take advantage of all the good stuff that is in Azure, and we want to start using the platform as a service and the service as a service, the software as a service components. We don't want to keep running on virtual machines, but that was the easiest thing to do. You take this thing that is running on your on-prem server and you package it up and you try and put it on a server in the cloud and run it from there.
Yep.
But very quickly we learned that even that wasn't as easy as it sounded, because setting up security for networks in Azure was different from doing that
Yep.
on-prem. You had no control over when the hardware would actually reboot. And they said they were going to do it at certain times, but literally it could happen at any time. You could be
Mhm.
so compared to running something that we had fully under control.
Yep.
What we found when we took those applications and we had them up and running in Azure, like doing the operations for them, even if we didn't touch the application, completely
Mhm.
changed. We had to take different stuff into account, put monitoring on different things,
Oh
deal with
yeah.
all that sort of stuff in a completely different way in the cloud than we would do on-prem.
So I couldn't agree more, right? So let's look at that operations stuff you're talking about. Way back when, right? Before the cloud, the application was writing to a log file or maybe a database, or using some kind
Yeah.
of tech to tell the world about how it is. And we've all
Mhm.
been remoting to machines, starting up perfmon and looking in the system
Yeah.
logs and things like that. We've done that. We've done that with the applications that we used to have before the cloud. And that's not exactly how you do it in the cloud.
No, that's not the way I would want to run any application today, because what we found out really quickly, I'm the kind of person when the application goes down and they need a volunteer to investigate what's wrong, I'll always be the one like raising my hand, because
Okay. Glutton for
um,
punishment.
well, it's for, you may get in trouble at home because, well, you may be home at 3 a.m., right?
Okay.
So that may happen. On the other hand, those are always the days you learn something. It's like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
this was not
Definitely.
supposed to happen. It happened anyway. We're going to find out why, and we're going to find out how we can avoid this from ever
Mhm.
happening again. Like, at some point, we had MSDTC fail in in an application we had lift and shifted into the cloud,
Right.
and this was built on an service bus with MSMQ. So you can imagine like around which time this was built. We don't do that stuff anymore today. And this actually relied on having a transaction across the queuing system and the database for
Right.
all of the message handlers. And at some point, MSDTC failed, which meant we couldn't complete any messages anymore, and the whole system ground to a halt. So, trying to investigate that on a network and computers that aren't yours, yeah, that was a fun night. We ended up ordering pizza. I think I got home way past 3 a.m. I think I got home like 5 in the morning, was already light outside. Um, I didn't have to go in the next day because, well, that's also part of the territory of the person who solves the problem, right? You're the hero for the day.
That's okay. That's okay then. Yeah, no, I get it. But getting down and dirty with a problem and learning something and figuring it out, that's absolutely brilliant. I love doing that myself. So how about now then? When you are in the cloud with an application, you need to use specialized tools and operations monitoring things that can deal with the fact that your application is now running on a PaaS service or doing some other thing or using multiple other components like a service bus or anything, and you need
Yes.
to figure all that stuff out using cloud technology or services that are appropriate for the context. What kind of tools would you be using today?
I think like the thing that changed most, and everything else ties into that. The thing that changed most is where we had those well looked after machines, and we moved into a whole bunch of commodity hardware in the cloud, not managed
Right.
by us. It's the whole cattle not herds philosophy, right? The cattle not pets.
Kettle. Yeah.
Cattle not pets philosophy about servers, right? Treat your servers as cattle, where any animal dying in the herd doesn't really matter.
No.
Whereas the old way we did things before was
Yeah.
often some meticulously configured machines that were treated as pets.
Yeah,
If
they
they
were
failed,
super
everything went down, but there was always like somebody really looking after stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yep.
everything ties into that, the way we deploy. For instance, like if we do things today and you start a project from scratch, you're going to want to look into setting up all of your infrastructure as code, right? You don't
Yep.
want to manually configure and click around in the Azure portal. You want to have scripts that can redeploy anything that you need to have your application running.
Yep.
Also, the way that we make services inside the bigger system, we're going to design smaller services and more of them tied together so that they're more resilient, so that we can easily scale some of the components in them. But the problem with that is you're virtually running a lot of instances of parts of your software.
Yep.
And monitoring that, you cannot no longer rely on log files or anything. You need something that gives you visibility across the whole ecosystem of things that you have
Yep.
up. So you're going to probably use something that's based on OpenTelemetry, plug that into Azure Monitor, and like all that sort of stuff. Or instead of Azure Monitor, there's plenty of alternatives out there for great observability providers. You're going to want to have visibility on all of the components, but also you're going to want to have a trace on this little failure right here. Where does that come from? Where did that originate into my system? And when it was all one server, it wasn't all that hard to do. But when it was,
could only come
when you're
from one
distributing
place.
stuff out, it becomes tricky.
Yeah.
So you'll design for that stuff up front now. It's not, monitoring and logging is not an afterthought. It never should have been, but you could easily tack it on if it was just a simple monolith. When you're thinking about a whole microservice system today, you're going to need to instrument from day one. You're going to need to do infrastructure as code from day one. But also, you're going to want to figure out what kind of orchestration you want to run this on. What do you want to happen when this one component comes under load? Do you want to automatically scale or not? And then you will have to design for that. And you can either do that by just running stuff in an app service that automatically increases its number of instances. You don't even need Kubernetes to do any of that. If it grows, you will probably move into something like that, but you don't really have to. I'm not going to be a Kubernetes advocate anytime soon.
No, me neither. I always try to run an application on the hosting environment that makes the most sense for that application specifically. Sure. It could be Kubernetes, it could be app service, could be anything, could be that it really needs to run on a VM. So yeah. What you're describing now sounds a lot complicated, right? I mean, there's lots of new learnings and new things that you need to get. So let me ask the stupid question. Why don't I just migrate the VMs to Azure and run it on the VM? Because, that really works. And so.
Well, that works, but you're also not taking advantage of a lot of the new stuff that is going to be available. Because not only the hosting platform has changed, the programming languages that we use have changed as well.
Yeah.
Because this is not a shift that happened just in the .NET world towards Azure. This is a shift that happened across the entire industry for all programming languages.
Right.
So you can even see this in the way that languages like Java or C# have evolved over the last decade. With .NET, it's super clear that we had this redesign from old .NET Framework to .NET Core, which was designed to be working in containers, which was designed to be working on Linux. It was designed to have faster startup times, faster response times, less fluff, less overhead, something that could be contained in a smaller unit, so to speak, right? And that's something we've also been seeing in Java. So I'm not dissing Java in any way. We've seen a similar move in that ecosystem, and we've seen like the appeal of doing Node.js, for instance. I still don't understand why you would want to do JavaScript on your backend, but the fact that people are using Node.js reflects that those smaller APIs are literally a thing that people are doing, and often the technology that we do inside them no longer matters that much because we can write the next service in something completely different, and we're going to communicate over queues. We're going to communicate over synchronous calls, HTTP, maybe some plain old WCF, right? Do you remember that, Magnus?
I can't believe we're that old.
But the thing with all of that is some of your complexity moves away from the individual services. So the individual services get a lot simpler, but some of the complexity of your application moves into the messaging patterns and the communication patterns between the services. And that's why it is important to also have visibility on that. Like, what is going on between all of my services and how are they talking to each other? Because that has become a first-class citizen in application design. Like, how we piece all those things together, that is the thing that we care about.
Yeah, it is. This is all music to my ears. I love what you're saying here. So essentially, it sounds to me a lot like moving to the cloud clearly is not just move your application there and then technical people will do technical things, except in the cloud now, because you need new skills, right?
And that's something the cloud vendors will sometimes try to sell you on. It's like, hey, we can take this application for you. We can move to the cloud. Like, I've not just talked to Microsoft about this. I've dealt with a lot of different clouds and cloud vendors.
Yeah, right. We have
you have those private cloud, you know those,
like,
right?
Define cloud, right? Anyway, that's it.
It's virtual service servers with a self-service provisioning portal. That's not cloud to me. To me, cloud is where we can.
We're talking about big public cloud and these things that come in those clouds. It's the number of different types of services that you could be using in the Azure platform is what? Several hundreds. We don't know how many.
It's impossible to keep track.
Yeah.
But the thing, it doesn't have to be many services for me.
No.
For me, the difference between like cloud and cloud is where you have crucial pieces of software that are operated for you, right?
Yeah.
Because if all you're going to give me is virtual machines, I'm still in 2005 land, right?
Absolutely right.
So
nobody likes that anymore.
No. So if I want to think about messaging between my services, I want to be able to get a fully operated message broker that I don't have to care about what runs behind the scenes. I just have to be able to pay for a certain capacity of throughput, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that throughput comes at a cost. I mean, I'm not disputing that. If I need to add more units to make that happen,
but what's the cost of running a reliable, scalable, messaging service? You can run your own messaging service in a cloud platform, but why would you?
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
In the beginning, in the early days of Azure, when they only had a few services, right? I read an
5 to begin
article
with or something.
on how it would effectively be cheaper per message to run your own RabbitMQ cluster on Azure than it would be to use Azure Service Bus. And I was like, you're missing the point, because you're also going to be maintaining all those virtual machines that your RabbitMQ runs on, and you're
Yep.
going to be maintaining your RabbitMQ.
Last I checked, your personnel cost wasn't 0.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember that blog post was like, yeah, this is the difference between the old days and the cloud. In the cloud, we're gonna pay for some commodity things.
Absolutely.
And that's totally fine, because it allows us as software developers and architects to focus on the things that actually matter.
Yep.
The things that are going to provide business value. Because deploying a database schema, deploying a database server, setting up a queuing system, I mean, you don't have to do that, because that's a solved problem. Somebody else has solved that for you. Some of the
Absolutely.
great engineers at Microsoft have built like things to keep those clusters alive, to keep them working properly, to monitor them, to make sure that if they go down, they can bring them back up without data loss. I mean, they have solved that problem for us so that we
Absolutely.
don't have to. So that we can think about, if this component of my software system talks to that other component in my business and I need to get a message across, what does the content of the message need to be? Because I don't need to worry about the reliability of getting that message there, right?
Correct.
And those are the things that put the cloud apart. And if you're going to use any of those managed components, then you can actually accelerate your software. And that's the way that I would migrate an old application into the cloud right now, is how can we carve out parts that we did right before because we needed to do it because running on-prem, carve out those parts and replace them with ready-built components that are already there.
With the software service that you just connect.
Yeah. Exactly. And like the first step is probably putting your database in a SQL server that is managed by Microsoft and not by yourself.
That's the simplest step ever.
If you were using some kind of abstraction on top of your queuing on-prem, let's say you're using a service bus or mass transit, if you're using some sort of abstraction, you can move the queuing layer to Azure Service Bus and no longer worry about the transport, right? And logically, it'll still do the same. And that will allow you to piece by piece rewrite components to take advantage of the cloud technology.
Exactly.
But it's never something we take this piece of software and we drop it online. And the hardest part to always talk to management about is the last mile. Like you've written most of the crucial components and like the important parts of the system are all running on new tech, but you have this little bit of leftover that is sitting there. And at some point, this becomes a liability because the technology is no longer supported. You're using maybe some libraries that require licensing costs. Nobody knows about how it was built anymore. I mean, it's also a people problem, right? And at some point, although that part of the system may not provide the most value, you still have to have that discussion like, look, this is costing us so much money, and this is such a big liability that we do have to make that investment to get rid of the old stuff. And I find that is often the hardest talk to have. It's the hardest part of the system to get a sign-off on. Because they're always weighing that against new functionality, right?
But having good architecture and good architects that can repurpose an old application for being a good fit in the cloud is, of course, crucial in this scenario. Being able to figure that out, because the business wants the promise of the cloud. They want the agility, they want the scalability, they want to pay per use, they want to have all those nice things. And you're never going to have that if you decide to just shift up your VMs to the cloud and run the same thing that you did before, except in the cloud now. You're never going to reach any of the good goals. Then you'll have to start taking the thing apart and figuring out which goes where. Can we replace this messaging thing with service bus or any other messaging? Caching, can we just use the Azure cache instead?
Sure.
Right, that's how it goes. So it's a journey from old to all right to excellent.
Yeah, but it takes time, and the first step is always training the team.
Yeah,
because you have the team that built the application on old tech, and they have skills that match that, and they have to learn how to think about building software differently. And the wrong move, because I work for a consulting firm, love that or hate it, I don't care. If you come in as a consultant, the tempting thing to do is to build a proof of concept and show them like what it can be, and then start lift and shifting into the cloud. But the bigger picture you need to look at is who are the people that are going to be doing this. And if you have to rely on their team, like training comes first. And you can still build that proof of concept and show the team. But then the second step is not starting the migration. It's like, here, I'm going to learn you how to do this stuff.
Yep.
I'm going to teach you how to get on board with the way of thinking that we do to operate software. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a bunch of workshops for them to be up to speed. Hopefully by then you have already identified sort of what components you're going to need. So you don't have to train them on all of Azure, but on a couple of components.
Yeah.
But that's the first step. And if you get them in, then and they will become motivated to do this, and they will see the bigger picture. And if they see the bigger picture, you can get them on board on carving out all of the parts of the old system.
Absolutely. So I think we can talk, you and I can talk for weeks about this topic.
And we will.
And we will, but not now, not tonight, not this instant. It has been absolutely a pleasure to have you with us today on the Cloud Show, Hannes. We went through so many important things. Essentially, train your people, migrate your application into platform services, make it awesome, and reach all that potential, all those promises of the cloud is kind of what we talked about.
And don't forget about the last little bit.
Just never forget about that. Which one?
Well, the last little bit, the last part of the system that you need to migrate to the awesome.
Yes, to the awesome place. Brilliant. We'll let the last little bit be the closing words of tonight's Cloud Show. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Hannes, for being on the star of the show tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'll see you next time on the Cloud Show.
See you next time. Bye-bye.